Hello, everyone, and good morning. We are going to get started here in a couple of minutes, so sit tight, please. All right, everyone, good morning, and welcome to the Contracting with State Government webinar. This is part one of a three-part series. My name is Jolene Graham, and I am joined here with my coworker, Matt Zweier. We are both business outreach liaisons with the California Department of General Services, and we specifically work in the Office of Small Business and Disabled Veteran Business Enterprise Services, or OSDS, as Matt and I refer to it. Matt's going to guide you through this webinar today, and after each section, we're going to take a break for a question and answer portion. With that being said, please use the chat feature to send in any questions or comments that you have. I'm going to be monitoring them the whole time. There's a lot of you on this webinar, so I'm going to get to your questions as best as I can. If you feel like when we're done here, your question has not been answered, please feel free to email our email inbox. It is custserv@dgs.ca.gov. That is custserv@dgs.ca.gov. We have a staff member constantly monitoring that inbox, and I will drop that email address into the chat for you guys. Matt and I would like to extend a large thank you to Caltrans and CPM Logistics for making this webinar happen. Without them, we definitely would not be here today. So Matt, let's go ahead and get started.
All right, thank you so much, Jolene. Welcome, everyone. Great to be able to be here with you today and talking about contracting with California state government. So let's dive in. Our objective today is hopefully by the end of this webinar, you will understand state procurement process and how it works, and hopefully you will be better equipped to navigate the contracting process. So let's look at specifically what topics we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about how the state buys, kind of conceptually and both procedurally. We're going to talk about acquisition methods, multiple types, contracts that are actually exempt from advertising. We're going to talk about a special category called leveraged procurement agreements, and then we'll discuss a few other acquisition methods. We will be talking about contract readiness and also commercially useful function, which if you attended the webinar yesterday on I'm Certified Now What, that'll be a little bit of a review, but always an important thing for us to talk about. Then lastly, I want to leave you with some resources that are going to help you pursue contract opportunities with the state and grow your business as a whole. We're also going to be having a little bit of presentations from Bob Adams from Caltrans and another presentation from the PTACs. So lots to come. We're going to have Q&A throughout this whole presentation. We're going to stop after each section for a bit of Q&A. So please do write your questions into Jolene at any time, and we'll make sure we address them. Let's go ahead and get started. So the first topic I want to cover is just looking at how the state buys. And the easiest way for me to try and explain it is to contrast it with how you and I buy. So when you and I want to buy something, we literally just walk into a store and buy it. Of course, I know right now we're not really walking into too many stores, maybe just for groceries or for essential items, but generally we might just walk into a store and buy it, or we go online on our phones and our computers and we just purchase it. And we buy because we think it's a good idea. We think it's worthwhile, we think it's a fair price, we think we're going to need it, and literally that's how we make these decisions. Government's a little bit different. Because the government is spending taxpayer dollars, and rightfully so, the taxpayers are very particular and concerned about how their money is spent. They want to make sure it's spent well, it's not wasted, and that it's actually getting what people need. And so all sorts of laws, rules, regulations show up that determine how the state can actually spend taxpayer money related to contracting. And all of these laws and rules and regulation coalesce into what we call acquisition methods. These are distinct procedural methods for purchasing all different types of goods and services. Whatever it is you want to sell to the state, guarantee you the state has some sort of acquisition method that can be used to actually purchase that. And it's not necessarily as simple as just going online and buying something or walking into a store and buying something. So the reason we want to talk about how the state buys is your ability to successfully get a contract with the state of California is improved when you have a better understanding of how the state actually goes about purchasing. It'll give you some inside knowledge into determining which opportunities are a best fit for your company, which ones are a good level of risk, you know, if you don't want to be too risky. And it'll help you just figure out where are the right opportunities. So let's dive into our first category of acquisition methods. These are going to be contracts that are exempt from advertising. So normally when the state of California wants to buy something, it writes up a contract and it throws that contract on Procure. If you attended the previous webinars in this series, or in the previous series, you were shown Procure. It's where you got your business registered. It's where you applied for certification. It's where you were taught about how to search for contracts, and that's true. But there are a lot of contracts that are actually not advertised on Procure at all. And I'm going to talk about the 3 most common ones I think you are likely to encounter as a certified small business or DVBE. The first is called fair and reasonable. It is for contracts that are less than $10,000. Very, very small contracts. And I know what you're thinking. $10,000 is a lot of money. Why is that considered small? Well, when the state of California spends $8 to $10 billion every year just in contract work, $10,000 is pennies to the state. And so here's how it works. The state is going to write a contract for less than $10,000. It could be for goods, services, even IT. And all the state needs to do is get one quote from either a small business or a large business. And if that quote is deemed fair and reasonable, then the state can make the purchase. I'm not going to dive into the various criteria that's used to determine fair and reasonable, but what this means for you as a company is responsiveness, right? If the state only needs one quote, you need to be able to respond when you get solicited. So if a buyer gives you a phone call or sends you an email and says, look, I've got this contract for $8,000. Can you give me a quote? This is a fair and reasonable. If you take 3 days to get back to them and another company gets back to them in 3 hours with a reasonable quote, that's fair and reasonable, they might just go with that first company that gave them the quote. So it is critical that you respond quickly. The next option, the next method is actually called the DVBE option, another not exempt from advertising. It is again for small contracts in the eyes of the state, anywhere from $5,000 to up to $250,000 or up to $333,000 for public works. And again, I know what you're thinking, $250,000 is not small. $250,000 is probably more money than any of us will ever see in our lives. I certainly know it is for me. But what's great about this acquisition method is it is exclusive to businesses that possess a small business or a DVBE certification. So if you are certified as a business, you can participate in the bidding process. If you are not certified, then you absolutely do not participate in the bidding process. And I'll give you a quick example. So my team, mine and Jolene's team, every year we put on an awards ceremony. It's wonderful. And we need to hire a photographer and we hire a videographer for it. And that contract falls within an DVBE option contract. And when we write up the statement of work and then we give it to our buyers who are going to go out and find the business that can potentially fulfill the contract, we tell them, only consider certified firms. Only consider bids from SBs and DVBEs. Don't consider any bids from non-certified firms because the contract is, it's certainly under $10,000. There's no reason we need to go to a large corporation for some photography and videography. We can very easily find a local, photographer or videographer that's a small business. And by possessing the certification, you get included in those opportunities. So the way this works is that the state is actually going to get 2 quotes from either 2 small businesses or 2 DVBEs. They can't mix and match, so it's got to be 2 of one or 2 of the other. They're going to look at both quotes, and they're going to go with the best one. Now, I know you're probably wondering, what's the best quote? How does the state evaluate which one's the winner? So there's a handful of factors. The most common thing is lowest cost. So if there's multiple bids and the state evaluates that each of those bids meets the criteria, so the person can actually do the work that's being performed, it is up to the state's standards, then it's going to go with lowest bid. That's not always the case. If a contract says differently, if a contract says that other criteria are being used to determine who is being awarded the contract, then that's the process being used, but it is mostly by lowest bid. So again, with something like this, you want to be able to be responsive. A buyer only needs 2 quotes this time. So it's not quite as simple as the fair and reasonable, but it is just requiring 2 quotes. Lastly, the last category that we're going to talk about that is exempt from advertising is called emergency purchases. And the state of California has a lot of emergencies. We have floods, we have fires, we have earthquakes and landslides, we have public health emergencies, like right now, we have public infrastructure, and even power outages. Emergency purchasing is a very, very different process than all other types of purchasing. When an emergency happens, and again, an emergency from the state's perspective is a sudden and unexpected occurrence that poses an immediate threat to life, essential public services, or property. And when an emergency happens, state agencies and entities are authorized to spend kind of whatever money they need to in order to address the emergency. The cost of doing nothing is far greater than the cost of doing something, and almost anything. So when the Oroville, dam breaks, they don't wait 3 weeks to write up a solicitation and put it out to bid, because the Sacramento area would flood in that period of time, and hundreds of thousands of people would die. So work is done very quickly. If you want to be part of emergency purchasing, that's great, that's wonderful. It does mean that you will receive communications at very odd hours of the day. You may get a phone call at 2 o'clock in the morning. You may be expected and asked to perform work before a contract is even written, because they need you to respond in a half hour or an hour. As you all know, right now we're in the middle of a COVID-19 pandemic, and this is absolutely an emergency for the state of California. And if you're wondering, you want to participate, you want to engage, you can support the state in some way, there's a specific website you can actually go to. Jolene is going to post that in the chat for you. The COVID-19 efforts are being funneled to the California Office of Emergency Services. They're asking all businesses who would like to support the state to go to this website that Jolene is giving you, register in that website, and indicate what kinds of goods and services you can provide for the state. So emergency purchasing is very, very different. Aside from COVID-19, we are also working on developing a bit of an emergency registry. So if you are curious or interested about doing emergency work even outside of COVID-19, maybe you want to help with fires, or maybe you want to help with floods or earthquakes. That's fine. That's great. There's another place we'll go ahead and send you. Jolene can post that in the chat as well. So the last thing that I'll say about contracts that are exempt from advertising before we move into Q&A is they are still competitively bid. Emergency purchasing may or may not. It really depends on the situation. But for fair and reasonable, and for the SB DVBE option, you notice the buyer does consider multiple bids. So it is competitive. It's just not publicly advertised. And so you might be wondering, well, how do you find out about these opportunities if they're not advertised anywhere? Because you're not going to get notified by CaliProcure because they don't exist on CaliProcure. And the way you find out about them is by a buyer or an advocate finding you, right? So you need to make sure, and hopefully you attended the presentation yesterday, you need to have a great profile on CaliProcure, just like you hopefully have a website for your company. And ideally, when people go into a web browser like Google or Firefox or Safari, and they search for a company, they search for goods or services that your company provides, they actually find your company when they search, and they can go to your website, read about what you do, and purchase your services. It's the exact same thing, except this time we're talking about not your business's website, but your profile in CaliProcure. Buyers need to be able to find you, and they need to be able to contact you and know that you're going to respond. We frequently hear from buyers that they'll email 100 businesses with a statement of work saying, we're inviting you to bid on this contract, and they'll hear back from 2 out of 100. And you gotta be able to be responsive. So I want to open it up for some Q&A for this first section on contracts exempt from advertising. What questions do we have?
Awesome, Matt. Thank you so much for that. We were getting a lot of questions asking about the fair and reasonable contracts. So I hope that you just answered that for them, but let's go ahead and reiterate on that. Most of the questions pertain to, if these aren't advertised, how do I find them?
Yeah. So that really is the big thing. And I hope a lot of you who are in attendance today attended the presentation yesterday given by my coworkers Daniel Rosinski Larson and Jermaine Carter Gibson about how to improve your CaliProcure profile. How do you very clearly state, these are the products and services that I sell, these are the service areas that I'm willing to work in, this is my phone number and my email address, so that buyers can contact you, and that you do, when you have an idea of the main departments you want to work with, you do reach out to the small business and DVBE advocate at that department. You email them, give them a phone call, make sure they know who you are, give them your capability statement, so that when an opportunity does show up in their department that would be a good fit for you, they can talk with their buyer about it, and they can actually say, I know of this small business. I talked to them last week. You should include them in the email blast you're going to send out. Right, because that's what you want to have happen.
Yes.
Great. Any other questions?
Yes, we do have a couple other questions here. Is it okay to ask an agency if an RFQ is fair and reasonable if the RFQ does not specify it?
Yes, you can absolutely ask that. You can absolutely ask that. You can also look at dollar thresholds if it's under $10,000. Certainly if it's over $10,000, then it's not going to be fair and reasonable. If it is under $10,000, it's much more likely can be. It does not have to be fair and reasonable. Buyers are encouraged largely because there's less paperwork when you do a fair and reasonable purchase. So if someone was going to do a purchase of, let's say, like $9,000, but it was very complex, the services or the products being purchased, logistically, they might not be able to do a fair and reasonable purchase, but they most likely would. And you can, of course, ask that of the buyer.
Definitely. Thank you, Matt. And just to pop back to our last question about how can we find these contracts, and, the buyers are going to be looking at your CaliProcure profile. If you're unsure of how to update that or anything, you can always reach out to us at that email address that I provided for you, custserve@dgs.ca.gov. Also, all of these webinars that we have been doing are all recorded and on YouTube. I would highly suggest to go in and watch them if you haven't had the opportunity to sit in on one live, because there's lots of good information out there for small businesses and DVBEs.
All right. Thank you, Jolene.
Thanks.
Are we good to move on?
Yes, sir. All
right. So let's talk about our next category of acquisition methods, leverage procurement agreements, or LPAs, as we call them. There are a lot of different types of leverage procurement agreements. I don't expect you to memorize this list of what leverage procurement agreements are, but I want to just talk a little bit about kind of conceptually how they work and how they are different from other contracts that you will be bidding on. So the state of California, it's pretty cyclical. Every year we tend to buy a lot of the similar things over and over again. And sometimes we end up buying the exact same products or services for kind of the exact same dollar amounts. And it's basically like the exact same contracts over and over again. And so rather than continually write new contracts every single time we need to purchase a particular good or service, we decide, why don't we just come up with a standing agreement between the state of California and a business or a bunch of businesses that says, look, anytime we need to buy product X or service Y, we can buy it from you for a pre-negotiated price and all sorts of other, delivery terms and conditions. And that'll make it simpler for everyone. It's simpler for the state. We don't have to keep writing solicitations. It's simpler for the business. The business doesn't have to keep bidding on things. And we could probably get a cheaper price too, because it's like we're buying in bulk. The expectation is we're going to be buying in bulk. And so what the state does is ends up writing what we call leverage procurement agreements. And there's, as you can see here from this list, there's a lot of different types of leverage procurement agreements. For instance, master service agreements, it's the third one on the list, that is for service contracts. And those contracts can last multiple years. We're talking maybe 3 to 5 years long. An example of a master service agreement contract is American Sign Language services. So as you may have seen, the governor's been giving some news briefings over the last few weeks about the pandemic, and standing next to the governor is someone doing American Sign Language. And so the state has these master service agreements for American Sign Language interpretation services, so that whenever we need to hire someone to do that interpretation, we can, and we don't have to put it out to bid and have companies bid on it. And I believe there are about 6 or 7 different companies that actually hold a master service agreement for American Sign Language interpretation services. And there's lots of them. You can see there's a software licensing program that's obviously for software. The California Multiple Awards Schedule program, which is up at the top of the list, is something that was talked about in yesterday's presentation. That is for both goods and services of different types. It can also be used not only by the state of California, but cities, counties, as well as school districts. So there's lots of opportunity here. I think the most important thing when talking about leverage procurement agreements is it's important for you to know if the state buys your types of goods or services through a leverage procurement agreement. Because if it does, the odds that the state's going to write up an individual solicitation and put it out to bid is lower. Right? So if you have a company that does American Sign Language interpretation services, and you're telling yourself, look, I know the state buys this. I see it all the time when the governor talks. How come I never see a contract put out to bid on CaliProcure for American Sign Language? Why isn't there ever a request for quote or and anything publicly done? And it's because there's already a master service agreement. And so it means if you want to become part of that, you're going to have to figure out how to get on that master service agreement or get on that software licensing program, whatever the leverage procurement agreement is for you. And I know you must be wondering how you actually do that. So I'm actually going to take us over to CaliProcure. I just want to show you where the leverage procurement agreements are, how you can actually get there. So this is CaliProcure. This should be a very familiar website for you. It's where you got registered, certified. If you were at the webinar yesterday, you were here a lot. This is the home page. If you go up to the top on quick links and click view/search contracts, it'll take you to this leverage procurement agreements page. I went ahead and did a search on food. There is actually leverage procurement agreements for food for the state of California. You can see these are all contracts for food, service, supplies, disposable, mandatory. This third one, that even says napkins only. And there's 14 of them. We're only looking at the first 10. And you can see I just searched by food. And if you actually click on one of these, you'll see the full details. And this is what it looks like. So you can see, of course, all the actual contract documents here. You can view them. They're most likely PDFs or Word documents or an Excel spreadsheet. You can see the codes associated with it. So it'll give you an idea, is this really up your alley in terms of your business? You can even see the begin date and the expiration date. So this contract ran from 2017 and it's going to go all the way to 2021. So these contracts last a significant period of time. If you are curious about being part of this contract, you've got the buyer right here. So you know who it is. You've got the email address, the phone number, and yes, they are at DGS, the department that Jolene and I work for. The process for getting onto any of these leverage procurement agreements, it differs. So there isn't a standard universal way. As much as I'd love to be able to tell you, yes, this is the one simple way to do it, it just isn't that. You're going to have to look into each individual contract and look at what is the process for that application. If you're wondering, you can easily do that on the DGS website. The DGS website has entire categories for the leverage procurement agreements that you can learn about. So I'm going to go ahead and hop back over to the PowerPoint presentation. And we've done a lot of talking about leverage procurement agreements. I'd love to, and so there's actually the more information. If you are curious just to learn more about LPAs, that's the website you can go to. But let's see, what questions do we have about leverage procurement agreements?
Thank you, Matt. We do have some questions here. We have one coming in that says, are LPAs a good opportunity for businesses who are just starting out?
So LPA is a great opportunity. So LPAs, I would say you're not prohibited from being part of an LPA if you are a brand new business. I will say though that as a brand new business that is just starting out, it can be difficult to do state contracting in general. Without much history of work, it can be hard to win state contracts. Can be hard to have the financial capacity to do state contracts. So we'll talk about financial capacity just a little bit later. So I would say I would only really seriously consider an LPA if you see that the state is really only buying your types of goods or services through that LPA, because it means like that's the only option for you. And if it really is the only option, then yes, I think if you are on the newer side of things, a CMAS would be one of the easier ones to guess. A CMAS is you actually submit an application to get a CMAS schedule. A schedule is like a list of goods and services that can be provided. There's tons of different schedules. You pick a schedule that is fitting for your business and you apply to be able to basically have that schedule and therefore sell to the state. And there can be dozens of other businesses who hold that same schedule and also sell to the state. So that's one to consider.
Awesome. And that kind of segues into our next question. Do you have to wait to be paid for an LPA like you do with regular state contracts?
Great question about payment. I'm actually not sure about how payment specifically works for LPA. That's a great question. We'll have to take that down and follow up with that individual.
Okay, perfect. We can definitely do that. And that's all we have for now, Matt. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. So now we're moving on to our section talking about other acquisition methods. They don't neatly fall into a category of like leverage procurement agreements or contracts exempt from advertising. And we're certainly not going to talk about all the acquisition methods. There's got to be more than 30. I don't even know what they all are, to be honest. These are just the common ones I think you're going to encounter. And just to be clear, the ones we're talking about now are going to be public, competitively bid on CaliProcure. So these are things you'll see on CaliProcure. The first one that we'll talk about is request for quotation, or RFQ. These all have acronyms, by the way. We love our acronyms in the state. So request for quotation, it is very common. It's very informal. It is a competitive solicitation. It is usually a very basic list of what is needed, how much do we need it, and what is the price that we're going for. The dollar threshold is generally 0 to 100,000 for request for quotation. It's typically very low in risk about contracts, and when we talk about risk in contracts, what we're really talking about is what is the risk for you as the business fulfilling the contract to make mistakes or struggle or fail to actually fulfill the contract as stipulated. And this tends to be more true with services than with products. As the services get more and more and more complex that you're being asked to provide, the risk of failure does go up, as well as how much money is the contract for. That also associates with risk. So RFQs are generally low in risk. For the award ceremony, I mentioned earlier that we have to hire a videographer and a photographer. For it, well, we also have to purchase awards to give to people, and nice little trophies. And so every year we have to order these, and we have an order form. It's a request for quotation. It's pretty simple. We want these 15 awards. We want quantities of 1 of this and 2 of that. And this is how much we want them for. And it's pretty easy for the company. They just fulfill the order. The second method is called request for information. This one's a little bit different. Request for information can actually be used to survey the marketplace. So as you all, I'm sure, know as private business owners, the state of California doesn't necessarily know what exists in the private sector, what kinds of goods or services might be out there that can fulfill a need that the state has. I can say personally, in doing outreach like this, I've frequently encountered businesses that say, look, I have a unique, innovative product or service that I think the state could really use, and the state doesn't even know it exists. So an RFI is actually a way for the state to initiate that process, to survey what is out there in the marketplace. So yeah, it's to understand what products or services may be available. It can also be used to project how much, the dollars that may be needed. So maybe the state has a general idea, but they're not really sure how much it's going to cost. And we'll use an RFI to see, oh, okay, this is about the cost we thought it was going to be. Great, we can move forward. Or maybe this is going to cost way more than we thought. We do not have the money for that. Okay, I guess we can't move forward. It can also be used to separate out interested suppliers from uninterested suppliers, so that they, as the state moves forward in the contracting process, they have a smaller pool to work with. RFIs can also be referred to as a request for interest. So if you see that terminology, it is the same thing as a request for information. A request for information, or request for interest, as it's sometimes called, is not necessarily a guarantee that you're going to be, given a contract and have work and be performing for the state of California. It is a beginning of that process. It is a great way to be able to present your ideas and your solutions to the state of California. So that's mainly what an RFI is. All right, next one, invitation for bid. This is used to obtain non-IT goods or IT goods or services. It often has detailed requirements. So I like to kind of contrast this with the request for quote. A request for quote is often very simple. There's not a need for a whole lot of detail. An invitation for bid is often going to have very detailed requirements about what is needed. The state is going to state very specifically what it needs. It is often awarded to the lowest bidder. And I know I've mentioned this before, and this tends to be true for kind of all the contracts. It is awarded to the lowest bidder unless stated otherwise. I know that can be really frustrating for business owners who, maybe they're not the lowest cost, but they are really high in quality. And we all kind of know the phrase, you get what you pay for. And sometimes for the state of California, that means we're going to pay the lowest price, and we're okay with getting not the highest quality in the world. And sometimes it's the reverse. Sometimes, having that really, really high quality is essential and really important. So it really just depends. When we talk about no discussions or negotiations, this is really around the idea that the state has a very clear idea of what it wants. This is not an opportunity for you to advise the state on what they should be doing, or what they should do differently. Now, you can do substitutions if there's a product that's in the contract and you think there really should be a different product, perhaps a more effective one or a better cost one. You can do substitutions. You do need to get permission to do substitutions. That is a common mistake. It's actually on a later slide about common mistakes. Price is key. Again, talking about going to the lowest bidder. And I have a bullet here just about the SB preference and the DVB incentive are applied. And so hopefully you're familiar with this a little bit already. One of the benefits of your small business certification or your DVBE certification is that you get a preference when submitting bids, 5% for small business, and for DVBE, anywhere from 0 to 5% incentive. The SB preference is applied automatically on all competitive bid solicitations that have at least one non-certified firm participating. The DVB incentive may or may not apply. It depends on the individual specific contract and if it is written into the contract. And so these preferences and incentives apply for IFBs as well as RFPs and even fair and reasonable, it applies for that. It doesn't apply for the SB-DVBE option because only certified firms are participating. So it's not going to apply for that one. Okay, lastly, this is our last one of the 4, is request for proposal. This is the most complex method of procurement that we're going to be talking about. It is for complex professional services. It is a very rigorous evaluation of the bidder qualifications. RFPs are awarded based on a weighted criteria identified in the package, meaning it is not just based on low price. There is lots of different criteria that it's used. There's actually, it can be designated as primary or secondary. Primary means low cost, secondary means best value. I'll give you an example of an RFP. So the state of California is building a few new buildings for employees. 1 down in Riverside for the Air Resources Board and 2 up in Sacramento on O and P Street. And total, they're around $1 billion. And the state put out a request for proposal, both for the design and actually the build of the buildings, and basically says we need a building constructed and it needs to hold X number of employees, 1,500 employees, 2,000 employees. Propose something. And that's where various architecture, engineering, and construction firms come forward and say, this is our proposal, this is what we think you should build. It requires you as the business to have a great deal of expertise and to advise the state on what they should do. The state is not going to come forward with huge amounts of details. That's going to be expected for you to provide. RFPs, when it comes to risk, are much riskier, simply because it's required for you to have the expertise to actually, perform the contract. So this actually wraps up, and yes, it is formally advertised on CaliProcure. I mentioned everything we've been talking about. These last 4 are advertised on CaliProcure. So that kind of wraps up our other acquisition methods section. Before we jump to Q&A, I just want to show you where you can actually look at these on CaliProcure. If you've been to CaliProcure, I'm sure you've seen it before, but I just want to touch on it real quick. So we'll go back to the home page of CaliProcure. If you go to the top at quick links and click view/search bids, they're talking about bid solicitations. That'll take you here to the contracts register. You can see we've got a lot of different things. Obviously, we can search by a description of it or the event ID of the department we want to work with. And if we click on one, this is what the event details actually look like. So you can see if there's going to be license type, obviously the contact information, and the full event package. So if you have questions or anything, you can, of course, contact the person here. And with that, I'll hop back over to the PowerPoint. And let's see what Q&A we have.
Awesome, Matt. Thank you very much. We have a question here. Are RFI responses public information?
Are RFI responses public information? If you wanted to get the information about RFIs, you would need to submit a public records request.
Okay. Thank you. And then we do have another question here. Do I have to submit an RFI in order to submit, or in order to qualify to submit an RFP?
Not necessarily. So those two are not inherently tied together. It is possible you may have to do that. It really depends on what the contract is stating. So an RFI may be the first in the process of a lengthy procurement that ends with an RFP. And the requirements may have been set early on that says, you need to participate in the RFI first in order to participate in the RFP, but that is not a blanket requirement.
Awesome. And then we do have one more question here. If I wanted to find available opportunities at LAX Airport, would those opportunities be on Cal eProcure?
Ooh, LAX Airport. So no, those would not be on Cal eProcure. The Los Angeles Airport is not part of state government. That would be, LAX Airport is actually kind of interesting. It's a bit of a coalition, but that would not be on Cal eProcure. I cannot honestly speak to how you would pursue contract opportunities with LA Airport other than to Google that, and you'd probably find their website.
Awesome. And that's all we have for now, Matt. Thank you.
All right, so let's move on to our next section. We're going to talk about contract readiness. So now that you know all about, acquisition methods and contracts and, where you can find them, whether they're a good fit, let's talk about whether you're actually ready for it. So, and these are really just kind of food for thought. Is the first one looking at, can you actually meet the evaluation criteria? And it can take a long time to write a bid response for certain contracts, and we want to make sure that you're using your time effectively and that you actually meet the qualifications for a contract before you spend all this time and energy bidding on it. So it may have requirements about past performance, required expertise or skill sets, or even production capability. Let's say, you produce, water bottles, and you've got a small factory and you can produce a certain amount of them that the state needs, let's say they need 5 times what you can produce. Are you really going to try and take on that contract? That might be a risk for you. For businesses that are just starting out and are brand new, contracts may expect certain amounts of past performance or required expertise of a certain number of years. If you don't have that, then it might not be a good fit for you. Something else to consider is really, can you actually deliver on the contract? So if you get a contract with the state of California, you're legally bound to deliver. It doesn't work to take the contract and then 3 days later say, my schedule got really busy, I'm not going to be able to do this. So sorry. Right? That's not okay. You're going to fail on the contract. That's going to be very bad for future opportunities. When we talked about, meeting requirements, we talk about financial capacity. So someone earlier asked a question about payment. How does payment work with leveraged procurement agreements? So because you're certified firms, for certified small business, not actually for DVBE, there's a thing called the Prompt Payment Act, which means that you will get paid up to 45 days after you finish the contract. So I know a lot of businesses think, oh, it's a $30,000 contract. Great. The state's going to give me the $30,000. I'm going to use that to fulfill the contract and it'll be done and good. Nope. That is not how that works. You need to be able to front the costs to fulfill the contract, and then the state has up to 45 days to pay you. So you have to be able to float those costs for a month and a half. And I'll be honest, sometimes the state is late on payments. You are entitled to late fees if that happens. But again, it still means you got to be able to float those costs. So you have to look at, do you actually have that cash on hand with your company? Do you need lines of credit? Do you need support from a financial institution? These are all really, really critical questions. Now, depending on the contract you have, it may, stipulate how exactly it is you're going to get paid. If you're doing, a year-long contract or a multi-year contract, you'll likely be getting paid in installments throughout the life of the contract. I can tell you for this award ceremony that Jolene and I put on, the one where we hire the videographer and photographer and the one where we hire the awards, so the videographer and the photographer, they have to be there the day of and shoot the whole ceremony. But then there's some post-production work that they have to do, and then they have to get the material to us. So when they finally give the material to us, that's when the contract is completed. And then the 45-day clock starts. And that could easily be 2 or 3 weeks after the ceremony has actually finished. So it can take some time. I want to mention some top mistakes that businesses make. We reached out to the small business and DVB advocates who, they work closely with purchasing and sometimes they're actually buyers. And we asked them, what are the most common mistakes you see businesses make that most likely result in them not getting the contract? I'm not going to read through all of these. You can read that list. A lot of these are very, very simple things that really just happen when there's not attention to detail. So you miss a signature in one place. You leave out a document. You missed the deadline by a day or by 5 minutes and you didn't get it in on time. You messed up on your math. There's spots where there's, repetitive information that you have to put in and it's different in different spots. So it's not the same. Not following all the directions on the solicitation. That's a big one. It's really critical that you are able to read the entire contract, that you understand what it is asking of you, and that you can respond in the way that is appropriate. I know businesses would love for there to be kind of a universal process for bidding on a contract, and so it's the same everywhere across the whole state, but that's not how it works. It's going to be different each time, and so it's important that you're able to read that and actually understand it. I encourage, have a checklist. Use this kind of thing as a checklist just to make sure you've done anything. I would hate to see your company lose out on a bid simply because you forgot to sign one of the documents, and that's why you can't actually do it. Lastly, I want to talk about some tips for success, things you can do to really make sure you succeed. Ask questions early on. You may have noticed that when I went into Cali Procure and I showed you the leverage procurement agreement, then I showed you that other contract. I mentioned the contact information of the buyer, their name, their email, sometimes their phone number. If you have questions, concerns, whatever, ask them right away. Do not wait until the end. Of course, make sure you read and understand all the requirements. At the end of this, we're going to talk about some resources that you can use to actually help you interpret a contract and successfully submit a bid. As much as Jolene and I and our team really want to help you succeed with the state of California, we do have some limitations and some boundaries on the ways in which we can help you. One of those is we can't help you interpret a contract, and we can't help you write a bid and make a bid proposal on it. We're not lawyers. We're also not experts in business who understand contract language. Now there are other resources, so don't worry, we're going to talk about those. One of them is actually going to talk today, so you'll get to hear from that. Let's do some quick Q&A about contract readiness.
Hi, Matt. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
We do have a question here, which you kind of just pointed to, actually. It seems like the bidding process is a little bit complicated for someone who is maybe not just starting out, but new to state service. Is there someone within the state I can work with for that, or is there a private organization that provides this service?
So when it comes to figuring out how the state works and how the state does things, you're always welcome to work with one of us. Jolene, myself, you can email custserve@dgs.ca.gov. In terms of outside, yes, there are resources, and I promise you we will get to that. I don't want to jump the gun here and take the thunder from one of our speakers, so we will absolutely get to that.
Okay, thank you. And then also, what if the contract has experience that is suggested and not required? Would you still encourage a small business to submit their bid if their experience isn't up to the suggested amount?
It's an interesting question. I don't know your company super well and how else you're positioned to respond. I tend to think of it like a job application. If it says requested but not required, I'm probably going to apply. And so if it doesn't cost you much to make a bid response, then I'd say go ahead and do it. Even if you don't get it, it can just be a good experience to go through the process of trying to bid on something.
Awesome. And then when it comes to bidding on a contract, when it says that there's a hard deadline of 2 p.m. today, does that mean that it has to be in by 2 p.m. today?
Yes, it does mean by 2 p.m. It does not mean by 2:01 or 2:02. It does mean by 2 p.m.
Awesome. Yeah. And those are all the questions we have for this section, Matt. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right, moving right along, we have our last section, commercially useful function. I don't want to spend too much time on this. You can see at the top are kind of the codes that establish it for small businesses and DVBEs. As a certified firm, you are required to perform a commercially useful function on all state contracts, whether you're a prime or a sub, vendor sub, whatever. If you're wondering whether you do perform a commercially useful function, the criteria is listed right there on the slide. Basically, what it means is you are meaningfully and legitimately performing the work of the contract in a way that is consistent with what your company does. So if your company does electrical work and that's what you do, you're not suddenly unexpectedly doing plumbing. That's completely outside of your work. And it means you're actually, doing work on the contract. You're not just having funds passed through you to someone else. If you're not performing commercially useful function, this is also what it looks like. Generally, what I tell businesses, as long as you are being open, honest, transparent, and truthful about how your company operates, the work that you are going to do, how you're going to do it, and any subcontracting you're going to do, you will be perfectly fine. Where businesses run into trouble is when they start withholding information or straight up lying to buyers. It is concerning when a person says, yeah, I sell products. I sell all kinds of products. Just tell me what you want and I'll get it for you. Don't worry about where I get it though. That's a little concerning for a buyer because it could sound like they're just going to be a financial pass-through and not actually do the work themselves. But again, as long as you are open and honest, you should be just fine. I know we don't have a whole lot of time, so I'm actually going to skip the Q&A on commercially useful function. If you do have questions, please write into custserve@dgs.ca.gov. Real quickly, these are the resources I mentioned earlier. SCORE is a group of retired experts that helps kind of with startups and business plans and kind of getting your business on its feet. Small business development centers are also going to provide assistance for kind of direct business development. It could be with financing or business plans. It could be with marketing. It could be helping figure out what business structure is right for you. And the PTACs, so the Procurement Technical Assistance Centers, we're going to have a presenter for that. I'm not going to speak to that too much on that because we actually have a presenter who's going to talk on that. And with that, I'm actually going to turn it over. Unless it looks like we have one question.
Yes, actually, not a question, but a little bit of a change in schedule. We are actually going to have Christina Kunkel present on PTAC, and we actually have her, and I promoted her as a co-host, so she can go ahead and share her screen now. It'd be awesome.
Okay, wonderful. So yeah, welcome Christina Kunkel. I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing. Christina, you can take over.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Give me 1 minute to get my slide shared. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you so much.
My name is Christina Kunkel. I am the program director for the NorCal PTAC. There are 6 PTACs, Procurement Technical Assistance Centers, in California and 95 in the United States. All of us have the same mission to help small businesses and disadvantaged businesses get their foot in the door to government contracts. And we can help with any government contracts, federal, state, local, actually tribal as well. And it looks like this slide was actually put together by the Monterey Bay PTAC. Their PTAC had $1.174 billion in government contracts last year. That's fantastic. I actually don't have the number for our PTAC on hand, but it is in the hundreds of millions as well. All PTACs provide the same services. We can help you one-on-one, especially in this environment with COVID-19. We're providing virtual counseling. So we can sit down with you one-on-one on a Zoom session like this or during a phone call, and we can help you with literally anything related to government contracts. So it doesn't matter if you are brand new to the government marketplace and let's say you need help getting through your Cal eProcure small business or DVBE certification, like Matt was just talking about. We can actually help you review a solicitation, interpret a solicitation, put together your bid proposal. We can't do it for you, but we can help you with that. We have a bid matching service that's free for all clients, and we set you up with keywords based on your business, and you start getting emails that are specifically catered to your business with opportunities in the state, federal, and local spheres. We can help you navigate certification programs like the state SB, DVBE, also the federal, SDVOSB, 8A, HubZone, everything, any type of certification. We can also help with those utility certifications, really any minority certifications. And we have tons of webinars on our website. Maybe I can share my link in the chat after this, but at norcalptac.org/webinars, we have tons of webinars that we've done in the past, all available for you to watch for free. And I like to say, I kind of skipped ahead, we are free. Our services are always free. I like to say that they're prepaid because we are taxpayer funded. You're already paying for us. You might as well use us. Okay, and so these are, looks like these are all of our partners. We work really closely with state agencies, federal agencies, special districts, courts, and we can also help you do business. I think I joined a little bit late, but I think I caught the end of someone asking how to do business with, was it an airport or a port? We can also help you with that. Yes, and if you'd like to sign up for services, here's our website. I don't know the Monterey Bay PTACs procedure, but we like to get back to clients within 2 business days of a complete application. Really, we're just here to help, and we love to help small businesses. We love to hear your successes. I guess I'll just tell you one short success story that we had this week. There was the USDA food box program that was put out by USDA. They were paying businesses who had extra food to donate to nonprofit food banks, and the USDA would pay a business to drop off food at a food bank. It was still a contract, it was a solicitation. So we had a lot of clients who contacted us who had never been involved with government contracting before, a lot of farmers. And we actually had one of our clients never won a contract before, never even dipped their foot in government contracting, won a $12.2 million contract this week. So we were really excited about that. Anyway, I think that's all I have. If anyone has any questions.
Hi, Christina. Thank you so much for hopping on with us. We really appreciate it. And I know that DGS for sure appreciates its partnership with all of the PTACs across California. We do have a question here. Is there a Southern Cal PTAC contact?
Yes, I will. Let's see. If you go to the website here, aptacus.org, you can click on a link to find your PTAC, and it will show you a listing of all of the PTACs in each state. So there's 6 PTACs. There's one in San Diego, one in Southern California. There's an Orange County location. Yeah, so there's plenty of PTACs that provide the exact same services for you.
Awesome, Christina. Do you have anything else for us?
No, thank you so much for having me, and enjoy.
Of course, thank you. And we're going to go ahead and pop over to Bob Adams. Now he is with Caltrans. So take it away, Bob.
Hey, thank you very much, Jolene. Really appreciate it. And really thank you guys very much for a great webinar. This has been fantastic. I am Bob Adams. I'm from Caltrans District 10. We cover Alpine, Amador, Calaveras, Mariposa, Tuolumne, San Joaquin, Stanislaus, and Merced. We have approximately 3,500 lane miles throughout the Central Valley and foothills that we're responsible for. And I just wanted to touch a little bit on some of the programs that are coming up and some of the things we're doing to help small business as we progress here in the coming year. One of those is a mentor protege program for construction firms, for not only small business, but small construction firms looking to tie in and gain experience with our prime contractors. And I'd like for you to encourage you to contact me if you would like to look into becoming involved in a program like this. Also, we have our new approach on our minor B programs here at District 10 and located in Stockton, by the way. And of course, this is for contracts or public works contracts that are under $314,000. And we have been doing a more direct approach, the SB DVBE Option, as it is for the minor B program. And so this is something we're starting to pick up and deliver on more and more throughout this coming fiscal year. So if you have ever wanted to gain experience in contracting with Caltrans and highway construction projects or other service contracts or procurement, if you're looking to, for procurement with Caltrans, please reach out to me and we'll help you get involved in that way as well. I also wanted to talk briefly about our contractor bootcamp training series. This is a series that we started about a year and a half ago. Other districts are going to be providing these as hopefully the COVID crisis kind of diminishes and falls away. But this offers certification not only for small business, but also finding opportunities with Caltrans, labor compliance, performing after the contract award, and a host of other items that we really want to emphasize to small businesses who would like to work in the contracting process. With that, I'd like to also thank for being involved in this webinar series. I really want to thank our other Caltrans small business liaisons spread throughout the other 12 districts in the state of California for their help and assistance in making this webinar series successful through their outreach efforts. We really appreciate it. I want to really say thank you to Jessica Bureau for her hard work in helping put this together as well. She's done a fantastic job. And so kudos to District 5 and Jessica down there and all the folks involved as well. I'd like to thank our partners in advertising who are also resources for you as a business and as business owners. NorCal PTAC, the Monterey Bay PTAC, who are both procurement technical assistance centers, the small business development centers, Cal Poly SBDC, Cal Coastal SBDC, the Economic Development Collaborative, the Associated General Contractors of California, the many chambers of commerce, including the Solvang Chamber, the Santa Maria Chamber of Commerce, the Caltrans Office of Civil Rights, Granite Construction, and CPM Logistics. We'd like to thank them all, and DGS, of course. You guys are wonderful. We really appreciate that. And CPM Logistics would like to ask that you stop by the Santa Barbara and Carpintero Highway 101 website. That is going to be located at, I hope I said that right, but www.granitehighway101.com. That's GRANITEHWY101.com to learn more about the project and bid opportunities with Granite Construction. And again, on behalf of District 10, thank you very much for letting us be involved in this wonderful webinar series. And I'll give it back to Jolene.
Hey, Bob, thank you so much for that. It's been a pleasure working with all of you guys here throughout these webinar series. So thank you everyone for attending. We really appreciate it, and we hope to see you guys again soon.